Commander Vex'thara stared at the holographic display with what could only be described as smug satisfaction. The blue-skinned Kalaxian had spent 3 rotations studying this backwater planet, and honestly, the humans were even more pathetic than the intelligence report suggested. "Status report, Lieutenant Quindal," she barked, her 4 arms crossed in what her species considered the ultimate display of confidence. The nervous junior officer's tentacles twitched as he consulted his data pad. "Commander, our scans confirm the planet's surface is 99.7% uninhabitable death zones. Toxic atmosphere in most regions, extreme weather patterns, and geological instability that would kill most civilized species within minutes." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in amusement. And yet these humans somehow managed to survive here for millennia. Impressive, in a cockroach sort of way. "There's more, Commander." Quindal's voice carried that particular tone that meant he was about to deliver news that would either be hilarious or terrifying. "Our long-range sensors have identified what appears to be their primary population centers. Most are clustered in relatively stable zones, but..." He paused, his skin shifting to a worried shade of purple. "But what, Lieutenant? Don't keep me in suspense. I haven't had a good laugh since we vaporized that Zentari merchant fleet." "Well, there's this one settlement. The locals call it Detroit. And Commander, it's somehow thriving in conditions that our environmental specialists classify as absolutely impossible for sentient life." Vex'thara's laugh was like the sound of grinding metal. "Oh, this should be good. Let me guess, they've discovered some primitive technology that allows them to survive in slightly less hostile conditions?" "Actually, no. Our analysis suggests the area should have been abandoned centuries ago. The infrastructure is collapsing, the economic indicators are catastrophic, and the environmental hazards are off the charts. Yet not only do humans continue to live there, they appear to have developed some kind of adaptation." The commander leaned forward, her interest genuinely piqued now. "What kind of adaptation?" Quindal's tentacles writhed nervously. "They seem to have evolved beyond normal human resilience. They've learned to thrive on adversity itself. When their industrial base collapsed, they didn't flee. When their government systems failed, they created their own. When their environment became toxic, they just got tougher." "Fascinating." Vex'thara's tone had shifted from amusement to something approaching respect. "So we're dealing with a subspecies of enhanced humans? It gets stranger, Commander. Our behavioral analysis indicates these Detroit humans have developed what can only be described as weaponized stubbornness. They refuse to accept defeat even when defeat is the only logical option. Their cultural motto appears to be, 'Can't have nothing nice,' but instead of giving up, they've turned spite into an art form." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Vex'thara processed this information, her tactical mind already shifting gears. The original plan had been simple: land, demand surrender, strip the planet of resources, and move on. Standard operating procedure for dealing with primitive civilizations, but this changed things. "Lieutenant, I want a full cultural analysis of this Detroit settlement. What makes them tick? What are their strengths, weaknesses, social structures?" "Already on it, Commander." Quindal's efficiency was one of the reasons he'd survived this long under Vex'thara's command. Preliminary findings suggest they've developed a unique survival philosophy. When faced with impossible odds, they don't just adapt, they weaponize the impossible odds themselves. "Explain." "Well, take their urban planning, for instance. Where most civilizations would see abandoned buildings and infrastructure decay as problems to be solved, Detroit humans have repurposed these elements as defensive positions. They've turned urban blight into urban camouflage. Their entire city has become one massive fortified position that looks like it's falling apart but is actually strategically designed." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Clever. What about their military capabilities?" "Here's where it gets really interesting, Commander. They don't have a formal military in the traditional sense. Instead, they've developed what appears to be a civilian population with military-grade survival instincts. Every resident is essentially a veteran of urban warfare, resource scarcity, and environmental hostility. The commander stood, pacing across the bridge with predatory grace. Are you telling me that this entire settlement is composed of battle-hardened survivors? It's worse than that, Commander. They've been fighting a war of attrition against their own planet for decades, and they're winning. These aren't soldiers in the conventional sense, they're something entirely new. They're humans who have learned to thrive in conditions that would break the spirit of most advanced civilizations. Vex'thara paused at the main viewport, staring down at the blue-green planet below. What had started as a routine conquest was rapidly becoming the most intriguing tactical challenge of her career. Lieutenant, what's our current invasion timeline? The fleet is prepared to begin orbital bombardment in 6 hours, followed by ground deployment in 12. Standard pacification protocols. Cancel that. The words came out before Vex'thara had fully processed her own decision. Commander? She turned back to her crew, and for the first time in her military career, she felt something she'd never experienced before. Uncertainty mixed with genuine curiosity. I said cancel the bombardment. We're going to try something different. Different how, Commander? Vex'thara's smile would have terrified most species in the galaxy, but her crew had learned to recognize it as a sign that their commander was about to do something spectacularly dangerous or spectacularly brilliant. Sometimes both. We're going to talk to them first. Specifically, we're going to talk to these Detroit humans. If they've truly weaponized survival itself, then I want to understand how before we make the mistake of underestimating them. Quindal's skin had shifted to a deep shade of green, the Kalaxian equivalent of extreme anxiety. Commander, with respect, first contact protocols suggest that direct communication with primitive species can be unpredictable. Lieutenant, nothing about this situation follows standard protocols. We're dealing with humans who have apparently turned living in hell into a competitive advantage. I have a feeling that unpredictable is exactly what we're about to get. She moved back to her command chair, settling into it with the fluid grace of a predator preparing to pounce. Open a communications channel to the surface. I want to speak directly to whoever's in charge of this Detroit settlement. And if they refuse to communicate, Commander? Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in what might have been anticipation or amusement. Oh, Lieutenant. Something tells me that's not going to be a problem. These humans have been spoiling for a fight their entire lives. The question isn't whether they'll talk to us. She paused, staring at the tactical display showing the sprawling urban landscape of Detroit far below. The question is whether we're prepared for what they're going to say. The communications array crackled to life, and what came through was not at all what Commander Vex'thara had expected. Instead of the primitive, fearful babbling she anticipated from a Deathworld species, a gravelly voice with an accent thick enough to cut with a plasma blade filled the bridge. Yeah, we see you up there, blue boy. You gonna sit in orbit all day, or you actually gonna do something? The entire bridge crew went silent. Lieutenant Quindal's tentacles had gone completely rigid, which was the Kalaxian equivalent of a full-system shock. Vex'thara's mandibles twitched. Did this human just call me blue boy? That would appear to be accurate, Commander, Quindal whispered, his voice barely audible. She leaned forward, activating the communication system. This is Commander Vex'thara of the Kalaxian Imperial Fleet. To whom am I speaking? Name's Marcus Thompson, but everyone around here calls me Big Mike. I run the neighborhood watch for the East Side. And lady, I gotta tell you, your timing sucks. We're right in the middle of fixing Mrs. Patterson's roof before the next storm hits. Vex'thara blinked all four of her eyes in rapid succession. You're fixing a roof. While an alien invasion fleet hovers above your planet. Well, yeah. Roof ain't gonna fix itself, and Mrs. Patterson's 87 years old. What kind of monsters you think we are? The commander looked around her bridge, searching the faces of her crew for some indication that this conversation was making sense to someone. She found only expressions of profound confusion. "Mr. Thompson, I don't think you understand the situation. We are a technologically superior alien species capable of reducing your entire settlement to radioactive dust." There was a pause, followed by what sounded distinctly like laughter. "Oh, honey. You think you're the first ones to threaten to blow up Detroit? Get in line. We've been hearing that for decades, and guess what? We're still here." Quindal frantically gestured at his data pad. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the city. They're powering up something." Finally, Vex'thara muttered. "Weapons systems. Now we're getting somewhere." "Actually, no," Quindal continued, his skin now a sickly shade of yellow. "These energy signatures don't match any known weapons technology. They appear to be household appliances. Lots of them. And construction equipment. Commander, they're not preparing for war. They're continuing their daily routines." Big Mike's voice crackled through the speakers again. "You still there, Blue Lady? Look, I got a proposition for you. Why don't you come down here, have a beer, and we'll talk about this like civilized folks." "A beer? Yeah, it's this liquid we drink that makes everything seem less terrible. Which, considering our circumstances, we've gotten pretty good at brewing. Hell, Tommy Kowalski down the street makes a batch that could probably power one of your spaceships." Vex'thara's tactical training kicked in. This was clearly some kind of trap. No primitive species would respond to an invasion threat with casual conversation and beverage offers. "Mr. Thompson, are you attempting to lure me into an ambush?" "Lady, if we wanted to ambush you, you'd already be ambushed. We've been tracking your ships since they entered the solar system 3 days ago. Nice cloaking technology, by the way. Almost made it past Jimmy Martinez's ham radio setup." "Ham radio?" Quindal squeaked. "Yeah, kid's been monitoring space communications since he was 12. Built his own equipment out of car parts and old television sets. Real resourceful, that one." The commander felt the first stirrings of what she would later recognize as respect. "You've been aware of our presence for 3 days?" "Course we have. You think we survived this long by not paying attention to who's in the neighborhood? But here's the thing, Blue Lady. You've been up there studying us, trying to figure out what makes us tick. Well, we've been studying you too." A chill ran down Vex'thara's spine. "Explain." "See, your ships put out a real specific electromagnetic signature. And Detroit's got more scrap metal and abandoned electronics than probably anywhere else on the planet. Turns out, when you wire all that together right, you get a pretty decent sensor network." Big Mike's voice took on a tone that was equal parts friendly and terrifying. "We know you've got 47 ships up there. We know your weapons capabilities, your shield frequencies, and your crew complement. We also know that your fuel cells are running about 30% below optimal efficiency, probably because you've been traveling for months without proper maintenance." The bridge crew stared at their instruments in horror. Every single detail Big Mike had mentioned was completely accurate. "How is that possible?" Vex'thara demanded. "Ma'am, we've been jury-rigging solutions to impossible problems since before most of your crew was born. You see junk, we see raw materials. You see a dying city, we see the most efficient survival machine ever built." Lieutenant Quindal was frantically running diagnostics on their systems. "Commander, they're right about the fuel efficiency. And somehow, they've been passively scanning our fleet without triggering any of our countermeasures. But that's impossible. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs." Big Mike's laughter filled the bridge again. "Lady, you're making the same mistake everyone makes about Detroit. You're assuming that advanced technology is better than practical technology. Your fancy sensors can't detect our systems because we built them out of stuff you don't even recognize as technology. Vex'thara was beginning to feel distinctly out of her depth. What do you want from us, Mr. Thompson? Want? We don't want anything from you. But I'll tell you what we're prepared to offer. You come down here, sit down with us, and we'll show you something that might just blow your mind. Which is how to turn a dead city into the most defensible position in the galaxy. How to make enemies into allies. How to take the worst hand you've ever been dealt and play it so well that everyone else at the table starts wondering if maybe they don't know the rules as well as they thought they did. The commander found herself genuinely curious. And in return? In return, you tell us about the galaxy out there. What's it like? Who's in charge? What kind of problems are folks dealing with? Because I'll bet you anything that whatever's got everyone fighting out there, we've seen worse right here. Vex'thara looked around her bridge one more time. Her crew was watching her with expressions ranging from terror to fascination. The logical thing to do was to begin the bombardment immediately. These humans were clearly more dangerous than initially assessed, but logic, she was beginning to realize, might not apply to this situation. Mr. Thompson, you're suggesting that instead of conquering your world, we should learn from it? I'm suggesting that maybe conquest ain't the only way to solve problems. Maybe sometimes the best way to win is to help everyone else win too. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Vex'thara had built her entire career on the principle that strength meant domination, that survival meant being stronger than everyone else, but here was an entire population that had somehow turned weakness into strength, isolation into community, and desperation into determination. Commander, Quindal whispered, what are your orders? Vex'thara stared at the tactical display, watching the energy signatures of a city that refused to die, populated by humans who had apparently weaponized hope itself. Prepare a shuttle, she said finally. It seems we're going to Detroit. Big Mike's voice crackled through the speakers one last time. Bring an appetite, Blue Lady. Mrs. Patterson's making her famous pierogies tonight, and after what you folks have been eating up there in space, you're gonna want the real thing. As the communication ended, Vex'thara realized that for the first time in her military career, she was about to walk into a situation where she had absolutely no idea what to expect, and somehow, that felt exactly right.